Welcome to Void of Fears, where the line between reality and nightmares blur with every tale. What you're about to hear has happened to someone, somewhere, perhaps even someone just like you. Our community continues to grow, and now we're reaching for 100,000 subscribers. If these glimpses into the unknown call to you, please consider subscribing. Now let's dive into tonight's story. Dr. Benjamin Hartwell's hands were shaking as he stared at the security footage on his laptop screen. Someone had been watching his Denver apartment for 3 days. The same black sedan, different license plates each time, always positioned with a clear view of his front door. He'd noticed other things too. The man in the grocery store who'd followed him down every aisle, pretending to shop but never buying anything. The woman at the gas station who'd been pumping fuel for 20 minutes without a tank filling. The phone calls that ended the moment he answered. Ben had made enemies in his 15 years as an aerospace journalist. Defense contractors didn't appreciate his exposés on cost overruns. Politicians hated his pieces on space program corruption. But this felt different. This felt personal. The knock came at exactly 11:47 p.m. Ben's blood turned to ice. He grabbed the baseball bat from beside his desk and crept toward the door, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the peephole, he saw nothing but empty hallway. Another knock. Softer this time, almost apologetic. When he opened the door, a brown package sat on the floor like a dead animal. No delivery person in sight, no return address. Just his name written in careful block letters that seemed to mock him in the dim hallway light. Inside his apartment, Ben's fingers trembled as he tore open the package. What spilled onto his desk made his blood turn cold. Declassified Apollo mission files bearing authentic NASA letterheads. Photographs of lunar surface features he'd never seen before. Audio transcripts with classification stamps from 1974. And at the bottom, a handwritten note on yellowed paper that smelled of cigarettes and fear. They didn't stop because of budget cuts. They stopped because of what they found. Your father knew the truth, Ben. Ask Angela Foster about Houston. Ask her about the recordings she kept. Ask her before they silence her too. Ben's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair, staring at the words. Your father knew the truth. But his father had been a janitor at Johnson Space Center, dead for 20 years. What could he possibly have known? His hands trembled as he examined the documents. His years at Mission Control had taught him to spot forgeries, and these were definitely real. The letterhead watermarks, the specific formatting, even the coffee stains on some pages, all screamed authenticity. But more than that, they contained information that had never been made public. Details about Apollo missions that weren't in any official record. Among the papers was a photograph that made him reach for his reading glasses. The lunar surface, but not from any Apollo mission he remembered. In the background, barely visible against the stark landscape, were formations that looked almost architectural. Geometric patterns that nature couldn't have created, and in the corner of the photo, a handwritten timestamp, Apollo 18, Day 7, Hartwell developing. Hartwell developing. His father's handwriting. Ben's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Call Dr. Angela Foster. Tell her Ben received the Houston package. Tell her Joseph's boy is ready to know the truth. Joseph, his father's name. Ben stared at the message, his mind reeling. Angela Foster had been his supervisor during his early years at NASA. She'd vanished from the space program suddenly in 1976, citing personal reasons. He hadn't spoken to her in over a decade, but he remembered her as brilliant, dedicated, and absolutely unshakable. The kind of woman who'd sooner die than compromise her integrity. After 20 minutes of searching, he found her number. Hello? Her voice was cautious, tired, but underneath it was something else. Relief. Angela, it's Ben Hartwell. I just received a package with your name in it. And my father's... A long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Oh God. Joseph said this day would come. He said if anything happened to him, you'd be the one to carry the torch. What torch? What are you talking about? My father was a janitor. Your father was many things, Ben. A janitor was just his cover. Can you get to Houston by tomorrow? I suppose so, but there's a diner called Millie's on Route 6, about 30 miles outside the city. Thursday at 2 p.m. Come alone and bring everything. And Ben, watch your back. If they sent you that package, it means they know you know. The line went dead. Ben spent the next 18 hours studying every document, every photograph, every transcript. The more he read, the more his comfortable understanding of space exploration history began to crumble. There were references to missions that had never happened, code names he'd never heard, personnel assignments that made no sense. But it was the audio transcripts that kept him awake all night. Conversations between mission control and astronauts that spoke of discoveries, of things found on the lunar surface that defied explanation. And through it all, the same code phrase appearing again and again. The sleepers must not wake. Millie's diner looked like something from the 1950s, all chrome and faded red vinyl. Angela sat in a corner booth, her once auburn hair now silver, her face lined with worry. She'd aged 20 years in the 10 since he'd last seen her, but her eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, still afraid. You look terrible, Ben said, sliding into the booth. You would too if you'd been carrying these secrets for half a century. She gestured to the manila envelope he'd placed on the table. Show me what you received. Ben spread the documents across the worn formica. Angela's face grew paler with each page, but when she saw the photograph, with his father's handwriting, she actually gasped. This is everything, she whispered. Everything we swore we'd never let see daylight. Angela, what are you talking about? What happened up there? And what did my father have to do with any of this? She looked around the empty diner, then leaned forward. Your father wasn't just a janitor, Ben. He was our inside man. NASA's most classified programs used contractors for film development and document processing, people they thought were invisible. Joseph volunteered for the assignment in 1971. Assignment? There were people in the space program who suspected something was wrong. Missions that went off script. Astronauts who came back, changed. Radio blackouts that lasted too long. Your father helped us document everything. Angela pulled out a worn notebook from her purse. What do you know about Apollo 17? Last lunar mission. Cernan and Schmidt spent 3 days on the surface. December 1972. That's the official story, but Commander David Sterling had an unscheduled EVA on day 3. He was supposed to collect samples from a crater, but something called him away from the landing site. Something he heard on the radio. Ben frowned. What kind of something? A signal, not from Earth, not from any known source. A pattern of sounds that seemed to be coming from inside the moon itself. Angela opened the notebook, revealing sketches and notes in her younger handwriting. Sterling followed the signal to the far side, where he found structures that couldn't be natural. Geometric patterns carved into the lunar bedrock, extending deep underground. But more than that, he found evidence of technology. Ancient technology. That's impossible. The moon is geologically dead. That's what we thought too. She turned the page, revealing more detailed sketches, but Sterling's photographs showed otherwise. Massive chambers beneath the surface, corridors that stretched for miles, and at the center of it all something that looked like a control room, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. Ben studied the sketches. They showed angular formations, like massive underground cities. Why wasn't this made public? Because of what happened when Sterling touched one of the symbols. Angela's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The signal stopped. Everything went quiet. And then, 3 hours later, Mission Control detected massive seismic activity across the entire lunar surface, like something enormous had just woken up. You're saying Sterling woke something up? Not something. Something's plural. The seismic readings showed movement in over 30 different locations, all underground, all heading toward the surface. Ben felt a chill run down his spine. What did Mission Control do? Ordered immediate silence and emergency return to Earth. Sterling was told that if he ever spoke about what he'd found, he'd be charged with treason. The photographs were classified at the highest levels. And 3 months later, Sterling died in a car accident. Accident? His brakes failed on a straight stretch of highway, in perfect weather. He was alone in the car, no witnesses. The accident report disappeared from police files 2 days later. Angela reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. But your father had made copies of everything. Sterling had given him duplicate photographs before the classification order came down, and he'd recorded Sterling's debriefing session. She pressed play. The speaker crackled with static, then a man's voice filled the air. Ben recognized it from old NASA footage, Commander David Sterling. They want me to say I imagined it, that the stress of the mission caused hallucinations. But I know what I saw down there. Those weren't natural formations. They were built, designed, and they were old. Older than anything humans have ever found. Another voice, Angela's but younger. Can you describe the symbols again? They weren't carved into the walls. They were part of the walls, like the rock itself had been shaped into these patterns. And when I touched one, it felt warm. Not from sunlight or radiation, but from something inside, something alive. What happened after you touched it? The whole chamber lit up, not with light, but with something else. Like the walls themselves were glowing. And then I heard them. Heard what? Voices, not human voices, something else. They were angry, like I'd disturbed their sleep. And they were hungry. The recording cut to static, then Sterling's voice returned. But it was different now. Strained. Terrified. I ran. God help me, I ran like a coward. But as I was leaving, I looked back and saw them, coming out of the deeper chambers. They looked like us, but wrong. Like someone had tried to copy human form, but had gotten the proportions all mixed up, too tall, too thin, moving in ways that bones shouldn't allow. How many did you see? Dozens, maybe hundreds, all heading toward the surface. And as I reached my rover, I heard the most terrifying sound I've ever heard in my life. They were calling to each other, coordinating, like they were planning something. Angela stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking. That was just the beginning, she said, because after Sterling's report, NASA realized we had a problem. We'd made contact with something that had been dormant for potentially millions of years, and our presence had woken them up. So what did they do? They planned one final mission, one last chance to understand what we were dealing with. Apollo 18. Ben's blood ran cold. There was no Apollo 18. The program ended with 17. Officially, yes, but in March 1975, we secretly launched one final mission. Commander Robert Hayes, Lunar Module, pilot Thomas Wright, and Command Module pilot Elena Kowalski. Their job was to return to Sterling's location and attempt communication with whatever was down there. The waitress refilled their coffee cups and Angela waited until she was gone before continuing. The mission was supposed to last 12 days. They had more advanced equipment than any previous Apollo mission. Better cameras, more sophisticated communication arrays, even experimental translation software in case the entities tried to communicate. Did they find them? Oh, they found them all right, but not where Sterling had left them. Angela fast-forwarded the recording to another segment. A different voice now, Commander Hayes. Mission Control, this is Apollo 18. We've reached the coordinates Sterling provided, but the area has changed significantly. The surface formations are different, larger, more complex. Can you describe what you're seeing, Bob? It's like a city, Control, a city built into the lunar surface. Structures that definitely weren't here during Sterling's mission. They've been building... Wright's voice joined in. Bob, you need to see this. There are what look like vehicles here. Not human vehicles, they're organic looking. Like they were grown rather than built. Mission Control, Hayes again. We're detecting movement inside the structures. Repeat, we have confirmed life signs on the lunar surface. A different voice responded from Earth, clearly agitated. Apollo 18, you are ordered to maintain safe distance. Do not approach the structures. Control, with respect, this is the discovery of the century. We need to attempt communication. Negative, Apollo 18. Your orders are observation only. Control, they've seen us. Something's coming out of the largest structure. The recording cut to static, then returned with Wright's voice filled with wonder and terror. My God, they're beautiful. And horrible. Like angels made of moonlight and shadow. Hayes. Mission Control, we are attempting first contact. The entities appear to be trying to communicate. Apollo 18, abort immediately. Return to lunar orbit. Control, we can't leave now. They're showing us things. Images. Like they're trying to tell us their history. Angela stopped the recording. That was day 3. By day 7, they'd learned to communicate with the entities. And what they learned changed everything. She played another segment. Hayes' voice, but different now. Calmer. Almost hypnotic. Mission Control, we've established meaningful contact. The entities call themselves the Watchers. They've been observing Earth for millions of years. They came here when our planet was young, before life as we know it existed. Apollo 18, your vital signs are showing irregularities. Are you feeling all right? We feel better than we ever have, Control. The Watchers have shared their knowledge with us. They've shown us the true history of the solar system. Earth isn't the first world to develop intelligent life. There have been others, many others. Wright's voice, they're not hostile, Control. They're gardeners. They plant the seeds of life and watch them grow. They planted the seeds that became humanity. Then why are they hidden on the moon? Hayes, because not all their children turn out as hoped. Some species become too aggressive, too destructive. When that happens, the Watchers have to prune the garden. The implication hit Ben like a physical blow. They're talking about extinction events. Angela nodded grimly. The dinosaurs. The Permian extinction. Every major die-off in Earth's history. According to Hayes' transmissions, the Watchers were responsible for all of them. And humanity was supposed to be different. The Watchers had learned from their mistakes. They'd seeded Earth with a species capable of both creation and destruction, hoping we'd choose creation. But as our technology advanced, as we reached into space, we proved we'd chosen destruction. Angela played the final segment. Hayes' voice, but now it sounded distant, dreamy. The Watchers have made their decision about humanity. We've shown too much aggression, too much potential for cosmic harm. But they're merciful. They'll give us one final chance to prove we can change. What kind of chance? They want to meet with Earth's leaders, to share their knowledge and see if we can evolve beyond our destructive nature. They're preparing to come to Earth. Mission Control's response was immediate and panicked. Apollo 18, negative. Under no circumstances are you to invite them to Earth. It's too late, Control. They're already coming. We've given them our coordinates. They'll be here within the year. The recording ended in static. That was day 8, Angela said, the last transmission we received. What happened to them? Angela's voice was barely audible. Flight Director Patricia Mills convened an emergency meeting with the highest levels of government. Military leaders, intelligence chiefs, even the president. They argued for 18 hours about what to do. She pulled out another recording device. This is from that meeting. Your father hid a recording device in the conference room. The audio was scratchy, but Ben could make out multiple voices arguing. "We cannot allow that spacecraft to return to Earth," a man was saying. "The crew has been compromised." "They're American heroes," another voice replied. "We don't abandon our people." "Those aren't our people anymore," a woman's voice cut in. Ben recognized it as Mills. "Listen to their medical telemetry. Heart rates that should be impossible. Brain activity patterns that don't match human consciousness. Whatever they encountered up there, it's changed them on a fundamental level." "The entities claim to be benevolent," someone else said, "and the crew believes them, but their definition of benevolence includes wiping out entire species. They've admitted to causing every major extinction event in Earth's history. Do we really want to invite them for a closer look at humanity?" A new voice entered the argument, speaking with authority. "The decision has been made. Submarine Neptune is in position. Apollo 18 will suffer a catastrophic system failure during Earth re-entry." "You're talking about murdering 3 astronauts." "I'm talking about saving 7 billion people." The recording continued with the sound of Mills crying, then arguing passionately against the decision. But in the end, she was overruled. 3 days later, Apollo 18's command module was destroyed by a missile fired from a nuclear submarine, Angela said. Officially, it was engine malfunction during re-entry. Unofficially, it was the most difficult decision in NASA's history. And Mills? Heart attack 3 days after the crew's death. She was 42, no prior cardiac history. But I think it was guilt, not genetics, that killed her. Ben sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he was hearing. So the moon is still inhabited. The Watchers are still there, still observing, still waiting. Every space agency on Earth knows the truth now. That's why no one has sent humans back in 50 years. Not the Americans, not the Russians, not the Chinese. The risk is too great. But I've been following the new lunar programs. China is planning manned missions. So is NASA's Artemis program. Angela's face went white. What are you talking about? Ben pulled out his phone and showed her recent news articles. China's Chang'e program. They're planning to land taikonauts on the far side next month, and NASA just approved funding for permanent lunar bases. Angela stared at the screen in horror. No, they can't. The knowledge was supposed to be passed down through classified channels. Every administrator, every mission planner, they should know. Maybe the institutional memory died with your generation. Or maybe someone wants them to make contact. Angela began pacing frantically. Ben, do you realize what this means? If they land on the far side, if they explore those areas with modern equipment, with more powerful transmitters and longer range communications, they'll wake them up again. Worse, they'll give them everything they need to understand modern human technology, our satellites, our internet, our weapon systems. The Watchers will have a complete picture of how far we've advanced and how much more dangerous we've become. As if summoned by their conversation, Angela's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it aloud. Chinese Space Agency announces successful launch of Chang'e 12 mission. First man landing on lunar far side scheduled for July 15th. Mission duration 30 days. That's 3 weeks from now, Ben said. Angela was already moving, gathering documents and recordings. We have to stop them, warn them, something. How? Who's going to believe a story like this? Your father believed it. Sterling believed it. Mills believed it. And now you believe it. Sometimes that's enough. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air outside. Through the small window, Ben could see searchlights sweeping across the parking lot. They found us, Angela whispered. She grabbed a backpack from under the table and began stuffing it with documents and recordings. Ben, your father left more than just photographs. There's a storage facility outside Austin. Unit 73. The key is taped under your father's headstone. What's in the facility? Everything. Complete audio recordings from Apollo 18. Video footage from the lunar surface, even biological samples the crew managed to transmit before the blackout. Biological samples? Hair, skin cells, DNA material from the Watchers themselves. Your father managed to intercept the data stream before it was classified. The helicopters were getting closer. Angela pressed the backpack into his hands. Get to Austin, find the facility, document everything. And Ben, there's something else your father discovered. The Watchers aren't the only ones on the moon. What do you mean? There are others, refugees from worlds the Watchers destroyed. They've been hiding in the deeper chambers, waiting for their chance to warn someone. The crew of Apollo 18 made contact with them too, but that part of the transmission was never recorded. How do you know this? Because one of them came to Earth 20 years ago. Your father helped hide him. Ben's world tilted on its axis. My father hid an alien? Dr. Kepler, your father's friend from the senior center, the one who died the same day your father did. Ben remembered Dr. Kepler, an elderly man who'd spent hours talking with his father about astronomy and space exploration. He'd seemed remarkably knowledgeable for someone who claimed to be a retired physics teacher. Kepler wasn't human. He was human once, from a world called Kepler 438b. The Watchers judged his species too aggressive and sterilized the planet. He escaped in a small craft and managed to reach our solar system. He's been living on the moon for 2,000 years, trying to find a way to warn other developing civilizations. The sound of vehicles surrounding the building made the decision for them. Angela kissed Ben's forehead, like a mother sending her son to war. There's a service road behind the facility. Take my car and drive south. Don't stop until you reach the storage facility. And Ben, if the Chinese mission makes contact, if the Watchers decide humanity has failed their test, you'll know. The signs will be unmistakable. What signs? Global communications failures, massive earthquakes, ocean levels rising at impossible rates. The Watchers don't just kill planets, Ben. They terraform them. They prepare them for the next species they want to try. Ben wanted to argue, but the sound of boots on gravel made the decision for him. He slipped out the back window and ran through the darkness toward Angela's car. As he drove away, he could see the facility surrounded by black vehicles and military personnel. In his rearview mirror, he watched the lights grow smaller until they disappeared entirely. The drive to Austin took 6 hours, during which Ben's mind raced with everything Angela had told him. By the time he reached the cemetery where his father was buried, the sun was beginning to rise. The key was exactly where Angela had said it would be, taped under his father's headstone with weatherproof adhesive. As Ben peeled it away, he noticed something carved into the stone that he'd never seen before. Hidden among the decorative scrollwork were symbols that looked almost identical to the ones in Sterling's sketches. The storage facility was a collection of metal buildings surrounded by chain-link fence on the outskirts of town. Unit 73 was in the back corner, hidden from the main road. When Ben opened it, he found something that looked more like a laboratory than a storage unit. Filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with documents, photographs, and audio recordings spanning 50 years. But in the center of the room was equipment Ben had never seen before. Screens and control panels that seemed to be made from the same material as the symbols in Sterling's photographs. They appeared to be off, but as Ben approached, they began to glow with their own inner light. A voice filled the room, speaking perfect English with an accent Ben couldn't place. "Hello, Benjamin. Your father said you would come here, eventually." Ben spun around, but the room was empty. The voice seemed to be coming from the equipment itself. "Who are you?" "My name is difficult to pronounce in your language. Your father called me Dr. Kepler. I am, as your people would say, not from around here." "Angela told me about you." You're from Kepler 438b. I was 2,000 years ago. Now I am from nowhere and everywhere. A refugee trying to save worlds that don't yet know they need saving. One of the screens flickered to life, showing the lunar surface. But this wasn't footage from any Apollo mission. The image was in perfect clarity, showing the moon as it was right now, and the surface was covered with structures that definitely weren't there during the Apollo era. The Watchers have been busy since your last visit, Kepler's voice continued. They've built launch facilities, preparation areas. They're getting ready for the final judgment of humanity. How long do we have? That depends on the Chinese mission. If they make the same mistakes your Apollo 18 crew made, if they accept the Watchers' invitation to share knowledge, then humanity's trial period will end. And if we fail the trial? The screen changed, showing Earth from space. But in this image, the continents were different. The oceans were a different colour, and orbiting the planet were structures that looked like massive space elevators. This is what Earth looked like the last time the Watchers had to prune their garden, 65 million years ago. The dinosaurs had developed intelligence, had begun to reach into space. The Watchers judged them too aggressive and reset the planet for their next experiment. Humanity. Humanity. And now it's humanity's turn to be judged. Ben stared at the image, trying to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. Why are you telling me this? What can one person do against beings that can reshape entire worlds? Because your father asked me the same question, and I told him what I'm telling you. The Watchers aren't invincible. They're just very, very old and very, very tired. Another screen activated, showing what looked like the interior of a vast chamber. In it, Ben could see hundreds of beings that matched Sterling's description of the Watchers. Tall, thin, moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. But they weren't moving much. Most of them appeared to be sleeping. They've been gardening worlds for millions of years. Each extinction, each reset, takes enormous energy. They're operating on reserves now, waiting for their next great awakening. The Chinese mission will trigger that awakening. So we stopped the mission. Too late. Chang'e 12 landed 6 hours ago. They've already made contact. Ben's blood turned to ice. What? The crew found the Watcher's transmission array and activated it out of curiosity. They've been in communication for 3 hours. The Watchers are pleased with humanity's technological progress. They're preparing to visit Earth to make their final assessment. When? 72 hours. They're using the Chinese spacecraft's navigation data to plot the most efficient route to Earth. Ben sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was hearing. It's over then. There's nothing we can do. There's one thing, but it would require sacrifice on a scale your species has never contemplated. What do you mean? The Watchers' weakness is their age. They rely on their technology to maintain their physical forms. Disrupt that technology, and they become vulnerable. But the only way to disrupt it is from inside their primary facility. On the moon? On the moon. Someone would have to get close enough to their central control system to introduce a virus I've been working on for 2,000 years. A virus designed specifically to corrupt their technology and trap them in a dormant state. How would someone get to the moon? NASA doesn't have any missions planned for months. NASA doesn't. But SpaceX does. Elon Musk has been secretly developing rapid deployment, lunar capability, emergency missions. The technology exists. Would Musk believe any of this? Musk has been briefed on the Apollo 18 situation. He's one of the few civilians who knows the truth. Your father made sure of that before he died. Ben's head was spinning. My father contacted Musk. Your father contacted everyone he thought might be able to help when the time came. Musk, Bezos, Richard Branson, even some foreign space agencies. There's an entire network of people who know about the Watchers and have been preparing for this day. Preparing how? Building weapons, developing countermeasures, creating backup plans for humanity's survival. Did you think your father spent 20 years just taking photographs? The screens around the room lit up, showing images Ben had never seen before. Underground facilities, spacecraft that didn't match any known design, groups of people in military-style uniforms bearing patches with symbols that looked like they belonged on a science fiction movie. What is all this? Humanity's insurance policy. We call it the Resistance, people from every nation, every walk of life, united by the knowledge that our species is living on borrowed time. How many people? 12,000 active members, 50,000 in reserve. Scientists, engineers, military personnel, politicians, business people, all working towards the same goal, ensuring that if the Watchers judge humanity unworthy, some of us will survive to try again. Ben studied the images, seeing familiar faces among the uniformed figures. Astronauts he recognized, scientists he'd interviewed, even some politicians he'd written about. This is incredible. But if you have all these resources, why do you need me? Because you're Joseph Hartwell's son, and your father wasn't just a photographer for the Resistance. He was its founder. The revelation hit Ben like a physical blow. My father founded this organization. After Apollo 17, your father knew that NASA's official response wasn't enough. Classifying the information and hoping the problem would go away wasn't a solution. So he began reaching out to people who could make a difference. Angela Foster was one of his first recruits. Angela is part of the Resistance. Angela has been coordinating our activities for 30 years. The meeting at the diner wasn't coincidental, Ben. It was a test. We needed to see if you were ready to learn the truth. And if I wasn't? Then you would have been given a cover story and sent home with your memory of the conversation altered. We have the technology to do that, thanks to Watcher artifacts your father recovered over the years. Ben felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his father, his career, had been built on lies and half-truths. So what happens now? Now you have a choice. You can walk away. We'll alter your memories, make sure you're safe, and handle the Watcher situation ourselves. Or you can take your father's place and help us save the world. What would that involve? Flying to the moon in an untested spacecraft? Infiltrating a facility built by beings that have destroyed countless civilizations? And potentially sacrificing your life to save 7 billion people? Ben looked around the room at the evidence of his father's secret life. The photographs, the recordings, the alien technology. Everything pointed to one inescapable conclusion. The world was about to end unless someone was willing to risk everything to stop it. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. SpaceX is launching a Starship from their Texas facility under the cover of a routine satellite deployment. The mission designation is Dragon 7, but the crew calls it the Hail Mary. Who else is going? Dr. Angela Foster. She designed the virus delivery system. Commander Elena Vasquez, former Navy SEAL turned astronaut. Dr. David Kim, xenobiologist specializing in non-terrestrial life forms. And Captain Alex Thompson, the only pilot crazy enough to attempt a lunar landing in an untested spacecraft. That's it? 5 people against an entire alien civilization? Sometimes that's all it takes. Your father believed that, and so do I. The screens around the room began displaying new information. Spacecraft schematics, mission timelines, technical specifications for equipment Ben had never imagined could exist. The plan is simple in concept, complex in execution, Kepler continued. Dragon 7 will land on the lunar far side, approximately 10 kilometers from the main Watcher facility. The team will use modified spacesuits to approach the facility on foot. Once inside, Dr. Foster will deploy the virus while the rest of the team provides security. What about the Chinese astronauts? They're already infected. The Watchers have been sharing their consciousness with the Chang'e 12 crew for hours. By now, the astronauts are fully converted. They'll defend the facility with their lives. Converted into what? Hybrid beings, part human, part Watcher. They retain their human memories and personalities, but their loyalty now belongs entirely to their new masters. It's how the Watchers maintain control over developing civilizations. They create a cadre of converts who can interface with both species. Ben thought about the Apollo 18 crew and their final transmissions. The calm, almost hypnotic quality of their voices. They hadn't been reporting back to Earth. They'd been recruited. How do we fight something like that? Very carefully. The converted retain human weaknesses, but they also possess Watcher abilities. Enhanced strength, limited telepathy, resistance to radiation, and vacuum. They're formidable opponents. And if we succeed, if we deploy the virus and disable the Watchers, then humanity gets to continue its experiment in consciousness for a few more thousand years. But make no mistake, Ben, this isn't a permanent solution. The Watchers are just one faction of a much larger galactic community. There are others who monitor developing civilizations. Some are benevolent, some are not. You're saying this won't end with the Watchers? I'm saying this is just the beginning. If humanity survives the next 72 hours, we'll have proven we're capable of defending ourselves. That will attract attention from other species. Some will want to help, others will want to conquer. The universe is a dangerous place, Ben, but it's also full of wonders your species can't yet imagine. Ben spent the next several hours studying the mission plans and technical specifications. The more he learned, the more he realized how desperate their situation really was. The Dragon 7 mission was essentially a suicide run, with a slim chance of success. But it was the only chance they had. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation and fear. Ben was transported to a private airfield outside Austin, where he met the rest of the Dragon 7 crew. They were everything Kepler had promised and more. Dr. Angela Foster looked 20 years younger than she had at the diner, her eyes bright with purpose and determination. She greeted Ben with a fierce hug and whispered, "Your father would be proud." Commander Elena Vasquez was compact and powerful, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving impossible situations. Her handshake could have crushed bones, but her smile was warm and reassuring. Dr. David Kim was younger than Ben had expected, maybe 35, with the intense focus of someone who'd spent his career studying things that shouldn't exist. When he spoke about the Watchers, it was with the clinical detachment of a scientist and the underlying terror of someone who truly understood what they were facing. Captain Alex Thompson was exactly what Ben had imagined when he heard crazy enough to attempt a lunar landing in an untested spacecraft. Tall, rangy, with a kind of reckless grin that suggested he flew experimental aircraft for fun. He clapped Ben on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, rookie, we'll get you there in one piece. Getting you back is somebody else's problem." The joke fell flat. Their briefing took place in a converted hangar that had been transformed into a mission control center. Banks of computers lined the walls, manned by technicians who looked like they belonged at NASA or JPL. At the center of it all was a massive screen showing real-time surveillance of the moon's far side. What Ben saw there made his stomach clench with terror. The Watcher facility had grown exponentially in the past 24 hours. What had been a collection of geometric structures was now a sprawling complex that covered dozens of square kilometers. Massive spires reached toward the black sky, connected by bridges and walkways that pulsed with their own inner light. "They're preparing for the migration," Angela explained, pointing to areas of the complex that seemed to be under active construction. The Watchers don't just judge civilizations from a distance. When they've made their decision, they establish a permanent presence on the target world. "How long do we have before they arrive on Earth?" Ben asked. "48 hours, Thompson replied. "Maybe less. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures moving through the asteroid belt. Something big is coming our way." Dr. Kim pulled up another image on the screen. This one showed Earth from space, but overlaid with projected trajectory paths. Dozens of them, all converging on major population centers. "The Watchers operate in fleet formations," he explained. "Once they've decided a world needs pruning, they move fast. Multiple landing sites, coordinated strikes, complete planetary subjugation within 72 hours. "What about the Chinese astronauts?" Ben asked. "Any word from Chang'e 12? The room fell silent. Commander Vasquez stepped forward, her expression grim. "They made their final transmission 6 hours ago, but it wasn't to Chinese mission control." She activated another screen, this one showing audio waveform patterns. "They broadcast on a frequency that doesn't exist in human communications technology. We think they were calling home." "Home?" "To the Watcher homeworld, wherever that is. The signal was powerful enough to reach beyond our solar system." Ben felt his knees go weak. They were calling for reinforcements. "More than that," Angela said quietly. "They were calling for the Judgment Fleet." The hangar's main doors began to open, revealing the most beautiful and terrifying spacecraft Ben had ever seen. It looked like someone had taken a traditional rocket and redesigned it using alien engineering principles. The hull was a seamless black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Instead of conventional engines, it had what looked like geometric patterns etched into its surface, patterns that glowed with the same inner light Ben had seen in the surveillance footage. "Dragon 7, Thompson said with obvious pride, "built using a combination of human engineering and recovered Watcher technology. She's fast, stealthy, and theoretically capable of surviving a direct hit from just about anything." "Theoretically?" Ben asked. "We've never actually tested her in combat, but the computer simulations are very encouraging." Ben climbed aboard the spacecraft with a mixture of excitement and terror. The interior was unlike any spacecraft he'd ever seen. Instead of banks of switches and gauges, the control surfaces were smooth panels that responded to touch and thought. The seats seemed to mold themselves to each crew member's body, and the viewing ports provided an impossibly clear view of the outside world. "The Watcher technology interfaces directly with human neural patterns," Dr. Kim explained as they strapped in for launch. "It reads your intentions and responds accordingly. Try not to think about crashing." "That's reassuring," Ben muttered. Launch was unlike anything Ben had experienced during his NASA days. Instead of the violent shaking and crushing G-forces of traditional rockets, Dragon 7 seemed to simply slip the bonds of Earth's gravity. One moment they were sitting in a hangar in Texas. The next they were floating in space with Earth falling away beneath them. "Transit time to lunar far side is 18 hours, Thompson announced. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day." But rest was impossible. Ben spent the journey staring out at the stars and thinking about his father. Had Joseph Hartwell known that his son would one day be flying to the moon, on an alien spacecraft to prevent the extinction of humanity? Had he planned this, or was it just the universe's idea of cosmic irony? As they approached the moon, the surveillance equipment began picking up transmissions from the Watcher facility. Dr. Kim monitored them with growing alarm. "They know we're coming," he announced. "The transmissions are definitely about us. They're coordinating some kind of response." "What kind of response?" Vasquez asked, checking her weapon systems. "Unknown, but energy readings from the facility have increased by 400% in the past hour. Whatever they're doing, it's big." Thompson adjusted their approach vector, bringing them in low over the lunar surface to avoid detection. But as they crested the final ridge before the Watcher facility, Ben gasped at what he saw below. The complex was alive with activity. Beings that matched Sterling's description of the Watchers moved between the structures with purpose and urgency. But more disturbing were the human figures among them. The Chang'e 12 crew still in their spacesuits but moving with the same fluid grace as their alien hosts. "Landing in 60 seconds, Thompson announced. "Everyone ready?" Ben checked his modified spacesuit one final time. Unlike traditional EVA gear, these suits incorporated Watcher technology that would allow them to survive in the harsh lunar environment indefinitely. They also provided enhanced strength and limited protection against the kind of weapons the Watchers might possess. The landing was oh so smooth Ben barely felt it. One moment they were flying over the lunar surface, the next they were setting down in a crater about 10 kilometers from the main facility. "Remember," Angela said as they prepared to disembark, "our primary objective is to reach the central control chamber and deploy the virus. Everything else is secondary, including our lives," Vasquez added grimly. They left Dragon 7 hidden in the crater and began the approach to the facility on foot. The lunar landscape was more treacherous than Ben had expected, with hidden crevasses and unstable terrain that could easily trap an unwary explorer. But their suits compensated for most of the challenges, providing enhanced mobility and sure footing even in the low-gravity environment. As they drew closer to the facility, Ben began to hear something that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space. A sound like singing, but not quite music. It seemed to come from inside his own head. A haunting melody that made him want to stop walking and listen more carefully. "Don't pay attention to the song," Dr. Kim warned. "It's how they recruit new converts. The melody is designed to resonate with human neural frequencies and make us more susceptible to their influence." "How do we block it out?" "We don't. We just don't listen too carefully." They reached the outer perimeter of the facility without being detected, but Ben could see that wouldn't last long. Patrol units moved between the structures in regular patterns, and some of them were definitely human. "Chang'e 12 crew," Vasquez whispered, pointing to 3 figures in Chinese spacesuits moving with unnatural coordination. "They're guarding the main entrance." "Can we go around them?" "Not without being seen. We're going to have to go through them." Ben had never been in combat before, and he hoped his inexperience wouldn't get everyone killed. But as they approached the converted Chinese astronauts, he realized that these weren't quite human anymore. Their movements were too fluid, too coordinated. They seemed to communicate without speaking, turning towards the Dragon 7 crew with perfect synchronization. And when they raised their weapons, Ben could see that the devices weren't quite human technology either. The first energy blast missed Ben by inches, leaving a molten crater in the lunar rock behind him. Vasquez returned fire with conventional weapons, but the converted astronauts shrugged off impacts that should have been lethal. "They're enhanced," she called out. "Standard weapons aren't going to be enough." Dr. Kim activated some kind of device that sent out a pulse of electromagnetic energy. The converted astronauts staggered, their coordination disrupted for just a moment. It was enough for Vasquez to close the distance and engage them in hand-to-hand combat. What followed was unlike any fight Ben had ever seen. The converted astronauts moved like dancers, flowing around Vasquez's attacks with impossible grace. But the commander was just as enhanced as they were, her suit providing strength and speed that matched their own. The battle ended when Angela activated a sonic disruptor that sent out frequencies specifically designed to interfere with Watcher neural patterns. The converted astronauts collapsed, their alien enhancements shorting out under the assault. "That won't keep them down for long," she warned. "We need to move fast." They entered the facility through what appeared to be a main corridor, but Ben quickly realized that the architecture didn't follow human logic. Passages curved in ways that seemed to defy geometry, and rooms opened into spaces that were larger than the structures that contained them. "Watcher construction uses folded space," Dr. Kim explained as they navigated the impossible corridors. "The interior dimensions don't match the exterior ones. It's how they fit such massive facilities into relatively small surface structures." The deeper they went, the stranger things became. The walls themselves seemed to be alive, pulsing with organic rhythms that suggested some kind of vast circulatory system, and the singing in Ben's head grew stronger, more insistent, until he had to concentrate just to maintain his own thoughts. They encountered more resistance as they approached the central chamber. Watcher defenders moved through the corridors like living shadows, their forms shifting and changing in ways that made them difficult to target. But the team's weapons, enhanced with Watcher technology, proved effective against their creators. The central chamber, when they finally reached it, was beyond anything Ben could have imagined. It was a vast spherical space that seemed to exist outside normal three-dimensional reality. The walls were covered with symbols that moved and changed as he watched, and in the center was a structure that could only be described as a living computer. "That's it," Angela breathed. "The central control node. If we can infect that with the virus, we can disable their entire network." But between them and their objective stood a figure that made Ben's blood run cold. It was human in basic shape, but twisted and elongated in ways that suggested extensive biological modification. When it turned toward them, Ben could see that it had been Commander Hayes from Apollo 18. "You're too late," Hayes said, his voice carrying harmonics that no human throat should be able to produce. "The Judgment Fleet is already en route. Earth's trial ends in 24 hours. "We can still stop this," Angela called out. "You were human once. You know what the right choice is." Hayes laughed, a sound like crystalline bells breaking. "I was limited once, bound by flesh and fear and the narrow thinking of a single species. The Watchers showed me truth. They showed me beauty. They showed me what consciousness can become when it's not trapped in biological limitations. They showed you how to betray your own species. They showed me how to transcend it." The battle that followed was unlike anything Ben had experienced. Hayes moved with impossible speed and coordination, seeming to anticipate their attacks before they made them. His weapons were integrated into his modified body, energy projectors that emerged from his hands and arms like organic technology. But the Dragon 7 team had advantages of their own. Their suits provided protection against his attacks, and their weapons had been specifically designed to combat Watcher technology. More importantly, they were fighting for something Hayes had given up: the future of their species. The turning point came when Dr. Kim activated a device that projected pure human neural patterns into the chamber. For just a moment, Hayes' coordination faltered, as some deep part of his original personality reasserted itself. "Elena?" he called out using Vasquez's first name. "Elena, is that you? I remember you from training. We were supposed to go to Mars together." "I'm here, Bob," Vasquez replied gently. "It's going to be okay." "I can't stop them," Hayes whispered, his voice momentarily human again. "They're in my head. They've been in my head for so long, I don't know where they end and I begin. Then help us stop them." For a moment, Ben thought Hayes might actually switch sides, but then the Watcher influence reasserted itself, and his features hardened back into their alien configuration. "The transformation cannot be reversed," he said, "but it can be shared." Hayes launched himself at Vasquez with inhuman speed, but Angela was ready for him. She activated the sonic disruptor at maximum power, sending out frequencies that caused the Watcher modifications to Hayes' body to convulse and spasm. "Now!" she called out, "while he's distracted!" Ben ran towards the central control node, clutching the virus delivery device Angela had given him. The structure seemed to sense his approach, defense systems activating to repel the intrusion. But his suit's Watcher technology allowed him to interface directly with the node's surface. The moment he made contact, Ben's consciousness exploded outward into a network that spanned the entire solar system. He could see through sensors on dozens of worlds, could feel the presence of millions of Watcher minds connected through quantum entanglement. And he could sense something else: the approaching Judgment Fleet, massive beyond human comprehension, carrying enough firepower to reshape entire continents. But he could also see the network's vulnerabilities, points where Kepler's virus could propagate through the system, creating cascade failures that would trap the Watchers in dormant states for thousands of years. Ben activated the virus and felt it spread through the network like wildfire. Watcher minds began going offline one by one, their ancient consciousness forced into hibernation by code designed by a refugee from their own genocidal policies. The effect on the facility was immediate and dramatic. The organic walls began to convulse and contract. The impossible geometry started to collapse back into normal three-dimensional space, and the singing in Ben's head cut off abruptly, leaving behind a silence that was almost painful. Hayes collapsed, his body reverting to something more recognizably human as the Watcher modifications shut down. He looked up at Ben with eyes that were finally his own. "Thank you," he whispered. "I've been trapped in there for 30 years. "The fleet," Ben gasped. "What about the Judgment fleet?" "Offline," Hayes replied. "The virus will propagate to their ships through the quantum network. They'll be forced into hibernation before they reach Earth." But their celebration was premature. As they prepared to leave the facility, alarms began sounding throughout the complex. Emergency lighting activated, and Ben could hear the sound of massive machinery powering up. "What's happening?" Vasquez called out. Dr. Kim checked his instruments, his face pale with terror. "Fail-safe protocol. The facility is going into lockdown mode. It's designed to prevent exactly what we just did." "What does that mean?" "It means we have about 10 minutes before this entire complex self-destructs, and the explosion will be powerful enough to crack the moon like an eggshell." They ran through corridors that were collapsing around them, following emergency lighting toward what they hoped was an exit. Behind them, Ben could hear the growing roar of systems shutting down in cascading failure. They reached Dragon 7 with minutes to spare, Thompson already firing up the engines as they dove through the airlock. The spacecraft lifted off just as the first explosions began behind them. "Everyone hold on," Thompson called out. "This is going to be rough." The shockwave from the facility's destruction caught them just as they cleared the lunar surface, sending Dragon 7 tumbling through space like a leaf in a hurricane. For a terrifying moment, Ben thought they were going to be torn apart by the forces involved. But Thompson's piloting skills and the spacecraft's Watcher-enhanced design pulled them through. They stabilized their flight path and began the long journey back to Earth, leaving behind a moon that would never be quite the same. The explosion had created a crater visible from Earth with the naked eye, a scar on the lunar surface that would serve as a reminder of humanity's first contact with a truly alien intelligence. "Mission control to Dragon 7, came a voice over the radio as they approached Earth. "Please confirm your status." "Dragon 7 to control," Thompson replied. "Mission successful. The Watchers have been neutralized. Earth is safe." "Copy that, Dragon 7. Welcome home." But Ben knew it wasn't really over. As Kepler had warned him, the Watchers were just one faction in a much larger galactic community. Humanity had proven it could defend itself, but that would attract attention from other species. Some benevolent, some decidedly not. The universe was a dangerous place, full of wonders and terrors that humans couldn't yet imagine. But it was also full of possibilities. And for the first time in 30 years, humanity would face those possibilities as a truly spacefaring species, armed with technology that could take them to the stars, and the knowledge that they were not alone. Ben looked out at the Earth growing larger in Dragon 7's viewports and thought about his father. Joseph Hartwell had spent 20 years preparing for this day, building a network of people who could save the world when the time came. He'd succeeded. But his greatest achievement wasn't the resistance or the technology or even the mission itself. His greatest achievement was teaching his son that sometimes one person really could make a difference. The stars were calling, and humanity was finally ready to answer.